The first red flag came early in our relationship, though I didn't recognize it as such at the time. One night, as we lay in bed talking about our dreams and fantasies, Clara hesitated before sharing something deeply personal. "Can I tell you something without you judging me?" she asked, her voice soft but serious. "Of course," I said, eager to know more about her. She took a deep breath before continuing. "I've always had this fantasy about being with more than one man at the same time." I blinked, unsure how to respond. "You mean, like a threesome?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. She nodded, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I know it's unconventional, but it's just something I've always been curious about." At the time, I shrugged it off. Everyone has fantasies, right? Just because she shared hers didn't mean she'd ever act on it. But looking back, that conversation was the first crack in the foundation of our relationship. Clara was also incredibly flirtatious, something I mistook for friendliness. Whether we were at a party or just out for dinner, she had a way of drawing people to her, especially men. She'd laugh at their jokes, touch their arms when she spoke to them, and give them her full attention in a way that often made me uncomfortable. When I brought it up to her once, she laughed it off. "I'm just being friendly, William," she said. "You don't have to be so insecure." Then there was her best friend, Clarissa. From the moment I met her, I knew she was trouble. Clarissa was bold, brash, and unapologetically promiscuous. She had a reputation for sleeping with married men, a fact she seemed almost proud of. "Don't judge her," Clara told me when I voiced my concerns. "She's just living her life." But Clarissa's influence was undeniable. Clara started making comments about how boring monogamy was, often laughing as if she were joking. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Now I see it as another warning sign I ignored. 5 years into our marriage, the first betrayal came to light. Clara had reconnected with Tom, an old boyfriend, at a high school reunion. I didn't think much of it when she mentioned he was there. But soon after, I started noticing changes in her behavior. She began spending more time on her phone, often smiling at texts she claimed were from her friends. She started dressing up more than usual, and she seemed distant. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. While she was in the shower, I picked up her phone and found a string of messages from Tom. "I can't stop thinking about last night. You looked amazing, just like I remember. When can I see you again?" My stomach churned as I read the messages. I confronted her that same night, and she broke down in tears. "It was a mistake," she sobbed. "I don't even know why I did it. It didn't mean anything, William. Please forgive me." I wanted to scream, to throw her out of the house. But instead, I found myself forgiving her. She promised it would never happen again, and I believed her. I wanted to believe her. For the sake of our family, I convinced myself it was a one-time lapse in judgment. 2 years later, it happened again. This time with Greg, a coworker. Clara had mentioned him in passing, describing him as a great guy and really funny. I didn't think much of it until she started going on business trips, something her job had never required before. One night, she returned from one of these trips with a glow I hadn't seen in years. When I asked her about it, she laughed. "It was just a good trip," she said. But the nagging feeling in my gut told me otherwise. The truth came out when I stumbled across an email she had left open on her laptop. It was from Greg. "Last night was amazing. I can't wait until our next trip." My hands shook as I read the message, my worst fears confirmed. When I confronted her, she didn't even try to deny it. "I was lonely, William," she said, turning the blame onto me. "You're always working, and I didn't feel like you cared about me anymore." Her words cut deep. Somehow she managed to make me feel like her infidelity was my fault. And once again, I forgave her. I told myself I was doing it for the kids, but deep down, I knew I was just afraid to let go. The final betrayal came 2 years later, and it was more devastating than anything I could have imagined. By this point, Clara's behavior had become increasingly erratic. She was out late more often, her excuses becoming flimsier by the day. And each time I asked where she had been or who she had been with, she would give me the same tired explanation. Just out with friends or a late meeting for work. But her words never sat right with me, and I began to feel like I was losing control of the situation. One night, Clara told me she was going to a friend's house for a girls' night. Something about the way she said it, the way her eyes darted around, made my stomach twist. The tone in her voice was too smooth, too rehearsed. It wasn't like her to be so vague. Normally, she'd be eager to share the details of who she was seeing, what they'd do, and so on. But this time, it felt different. It wasn't just the uncertainty of the evening. No, it was more the way she avoided my gaze, like she was hiding something. The old familiar feeling of suspicion crept up again. The same feeling I'd been ignoring for so long. My gut screamed at me that something wasn't right. As soon as she left, I couldn't stay still. I paced around the house, my mind racing with thoughts I didn't want to entertain. Then, without thinking, I grabbed my keys. My heart hammered as I pulled out of the driveway, driving slowly down the street, trying to quiet the whirlwind in my mind. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was the night everything would come crashing down. I parked a block away from the address she had given me, watching the house she had claimed was the destination for her girls' night. I sat there for a while, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my thoughts bouncing between disbelief and dread. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just imagining things. But then Clara arrived. She walked up to the door, and before she even knocked, two men appeared, greeting her with hearty laughs and wide smiles. She smiled too, her laughter mingling with theirs as they embraced. My stomach turned as I watched. It didn't make sense. Why would she be so cozy with two men, especially if she was just supposed to be spending time with a friend? The sinking feeling in my chest deepened. After an hour, I couldn't take it anymore. I walked up to the house, my legs feeling heavier with each step. When I reached the door, I knocked softly at first. Then, hearing nothing, I pushed the door open. It was unlocked, an invitation, a betrayal in itself. My heart raced as I stepped inside. I moved quietly, trying not to make a sound, but my footsteps seemed to echo in the silence. As I turned the corner into the living room, I froze. The sight in front of me confirmed every horrible thought I'd been trying to suppress. Clara was in the bedroom, her body tangled in the sheets with both men. Her arms were wrapped around one of them, and the other man was kissing her neck. Their laughter echoed in the background, blending with the sounds of their passion. It was a scene I had feared, but I never thought I would actually witness it. My wife, the woman I had loved and trusted, in bed with two men. When Clara saw me, her face turned white, her eyes wide with shock and fear. Her hands scrambled to cover herself, but the damage was already done. She tried to sit up, but the shame was written all over her face. It was the moment I'd been dreading, and yet, nothing could prepare me for the gut-wrenching pain of seeing her in that situation. "William," she said, her voice shaky as she quickly tried to adjust her clothes. This isn't what it looks like. Please, let me explain." Her words felt hollow, like a feeble attempt to placate me, to make the situation less real, less painful. But it was exactly what it looked like. There was no explanation, no justification, no reason that could make what I was seeing okay. I didn't say a word. My heart was pounding in my chest, my mind struggling to comprehend the reality in front of me. I turned and walked out of the room, my legs numb beneath me. Every step felt like I was walking through mud, my body and mind disconnected as I tried to process the betrayal. My thoughts were a tangled mess of anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. Clara's voice followed me as I walked out the door, but I didn't stop. "William, wait. Please don't leave like this. Please let me explain. It's not what you think." I didn't turn back. I walked out into the night, the cool air doing nothing to ease the storm raging inside me. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care. My heart was shattered into pieces, and all I could think about was the woman I had loved, the woman who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. When I finally made it back home, Clara was there, sitting on the couch, her eyes puffy and red from crying. She was trying to look composed, but I could see through the facade. She had nothing left to say, or so I thought. Then Clara spoke. She was quiet at first, but then the words started flowing, her voice shaky and desperate. "William, I'm so sorry," she said, her face pale as she wiped at her eyes. "I don't know what's wrong with me. I've been trying to stop, but I can't. I think I have a problem, a serious problem." She sniffled and looked at me, her expression torn with guilt and confusion. "I've been seeing other people because I have a sexual addiction, William. I need help. I need therapy. I swear, I love you. I've always loved you." Her words felt like a punch to the gut. She was admitting to everything, but not in the way I had expected. Instead of taking responsibility, she tried to twist the situation into something that was my fault. She wanted to make it sound like she was helpless, that she was fighting some uncontrollable urge. She needed help, she said. Therapy. She needed me to support her. She needed me to be her rock, to understand that this was something she couldn't control. I stood there, numb. "Sexual addiction?" I repeated, my voice tight. "So this was some kind of disease, Clara? That's what you're telling me?" "I know it sounds crazy, but it's true," she continued, her tears now falling freely. "I've always loved you, William. I don't want to lose you. I need help. I'll go to therapy, I'll do anything, but please, don't leave me. Don't walk away from our family." Her manipulation was seamless. She had always been good at this, turning the blame around, making it seem like I was the one who was supposed to fix everything. She had a way of making me feel guilty for her actions, and this time was no different. She wanted me to feel like the failure for not recognizing her struggle, for not seeing the signs sooner. But something inside me snapped. Deep down, I knew the truth. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep excusing her behavior, forgiving her for things she didn't even truly apologize for. The weight of all her lies, all her manipulation, suddenly felt too heavy to carry. "Clara, I can't do this anymore," I said quietly. "I can't fix you. I can't keep making excuses for you." Her eyes widened, the fear and desperation clearly visible. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "You don't love me anymore?" "I love the woman you used to be," I said, my voice breaking. "But I don't recognize you anymore, Clara. This isn't love." I walked out of the room, the tears finally falling, and I realized, with painful clarity, that I was done. Throughout our marriage, Clara had a way of making me feel like I was the one who was crazy. Whenever I questioned her late nights or her sudden business trips, she would laugh and call me paranoid. "You're always so suspicious," she'd say. "Why can't you just trust me?" Her words planted seeds of doubt in my mind, making me question my own judgment. But deep down, I always knew something was wrong. I just didn't want to admit it. I was too afraid of what it would mean for our family, too afraid of losing the woman I thought I loved. In the end, Clara's betrayals left me with no choice. I had to let go, for my own sanity, for the sake of our children, and for the life I still hoped to rebuild. Filing for divorce was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most liberating. Looking back, I regret ignoring the red flags. I regret marrying someone who was so clearly wrong for me. But most of all, I regret not having the courage to leave sooner.